Hi, my name is Deanne Yamamoto, and I'm KCSARC's Deputy Executive Director, and will serve as your MC for today's program. It is my great honor to welcome you to Drawing on Our Strength. Thank you so much for joining us for KCSARC's first ever virtual fundraising event. We have put our heart and soul into planning of this event so that each one of you has a front row experience. I want to pause now and give recognition and thanks to a couple of our donors who made this program possible, Amazon and Rushing. Thank you so much for your partnership and for making this event so possible. As well as Alaska Airlines, I want to thank, and you'll want to thank them too, because they donated 2 round-trip tickets. And just for joining us today, you will be eligible to win. And I will announce that at the end of the show. So you'll want to stay tuned. I could call your name. I might call your name. Thanks also to our challenge pool and visionary donors whose names you will see on the screen right now. Over the next hour, we will draw on our collective strength and draw you into the work that we do every day at KCSARC, which is to empower survivors of sexual assault and the role that we all play to create a world free of sexual violence. And of course, we're very excited to hear from Tarana Burke, a global leader who has made a positive impact in the lives of so many survivors. Right now, we want to welcome you into the work world of KCSARC as we shine a light for survivors.
Imagine your child.
Your best friend.
Your neighbor tells you they've been sexually abused. It's a shock that no one is equipped to manage. Keeping sexual assault in the shadows has kept survivors and their families from getting the help that they need to regain their lives.
It's time to bring sexual assault into the light.
The King County Sexual Assault Resource Center is here, shining a light on sexual assault so it has nowhere to hide.
After all, we can't change what we can't see or talk about.
We equip survivors, families, and our whole community with the tools they need to shine a light on sexual violence.
Survivors and families living with trauma find help 24 hours a day at our resource line.
In your corner is a team of advocates, therapists, and parent educators who walk with you every step of the way,
supporting you and empowering you with the information that you need in English and in Spanish.
Lo importante es tomar decisiones y tomar el control de regreso.
KCSARC also works in the community, shining a bright light on long-accepted beliefs, attitudes, and behaviors that contribute to sexual violence. This way, the next generation is equipped to make big change.
Everyone.
Cada uno de nosotros.
Everyone has a role to play in ending sexual violence. Shine your own light and be part of the solution. You can start by knowing what KCSARC does in your community.
I have been at KCSARC for over 35 years, holding the responsibility of creating and launching programs benefiting survivors for now and in the future. In a way, I walk around the office with a crystal ball and predict what service we should offer next in order to help and support the survivors we deal with every day. But 3 years ago, I could never have predicted the incredible surge in survivors calling for help and the national dialogue around Me Too. The number of survivors calling for service has increased 22%, and that number has remained steady. But now, in the midst of this pandemic, which again I failed to predict, we have an even higher demand for services. We made a fast transition from seeing clients in the office one day and out remotely serving clients the next day via telehealth, telephone, and the internet. The level of innovation that made this possible is because of people like you who continue to support us in our work. I'd like to introduce you now to somebody that I work with, and I have from the very first day at KCSARC, my boss and KCSARC's Executive Director, Mary Ellen Stone. Mary Ellen, we seem to end every year with the same phrase, right? We get together, we have lunch, we reminisce about the year, and what do we say to each other?
It's been quite a year.
Can you tell us a little bit about what you would highlight for 2020?
Sure,
folks?
Knowing that it's not even done yet.
It's not done yet.
But, I mean, obviously, how we responded in the pandemic, I am proud beyond belief and humbled by how our staff and our community came together. Staff did a magnificent job, and I think it's important for us to remember, too, we were starting this year 22% higher than we had the last couple years, so services were at an all-time high, and that people could rally and say, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this together, and that the community was there saying, hey, we need you, and we're with you. That has been humbling and encouraging. So I think about that. I think about the complications now with services. I mean, granted, we're doing a great job with the telehealth. Access in some ways are easier. But, I mean, you and I talk about this every day. Access around a lot of the legal issues is much more challenging, and some of the decisions that are being made literally on closed Zoom rooms is heartening and discouraging. So super concerned about that. I think in the end, though, where I'm really hopeful is the whole issue around resilience. We talk about resilience, and I know that every day with our clients. We talk about that with staff, but now we're talking about with the community in a way that's like a responsibility for us, and it's a way we can contribute and help more people than we had ever thought about before. So it's the resilience that we want to really focus on.
Absolutely. And I feel the same way. I mean, I think that's what has kept me engaged in this work for so long, is just the resilience that we get to bear witness to every single day as we work with survivors. And on that note, I want to introduce you to someone who is a friend of the agency, who's a member of the Speakers Bureau, and who is a former client. Please welcome Svi.
Hi, my name is Svi. I'm a musician, singer, music producer, and healer. I started life as a singer and spent most of my time growing up singing in choirs and independently recording, writing songs. Several years ago, I was the victim of a sexual assault while I was traveling in Montana, and it was completely life-changing for me. I spent a year not knowing that the experience had even happened because I was drugged. There were years of my life where I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't work a full day. I never thought before I came to KCSARC that I would ever feel quote unquote normal again. I did not sing for at least 2 years after the assault, and probably only sang in front of people 3 times. You know, I describe my experience in calling KCSARC as just like landing on a soft pillow, or it was literally just that first phone call where I knew everything was going to be okay. The staff that I was speaking to on the phone, they were so confident in the help that they could provide, and I knew in that moment that I was going to be okay. I knew that I was going to be better than I was, and that there was some hope again. I was terrified the day that I walked through the doors at KCSARC. It's one of the scariest experiences of my life, actually. And, you know, there's a part of you when you go through an experience like that that doesn't want to heal. And so it took me probably 3 weeks of going back to her before I realized that I was healing. I had been speaking about my experience as this maybe sort of thing that could have happened. And I'm months into my therapy process at this point in time, and my therapist that day looked at me and said, you know, what if you started acknowledging that this is an experience that happened to you? And it was from that moment forward that I felt sort of a lot of that pain being lifted, because I realized that I couldn't even admit that this thing had happened to me, even though everyone else around me was now acknowledging it. So as I unlocked that pain, I started to feel more like myself. Through the therapy process, it was singing, it was music that was a point of reference for me to understand my growth, understand my healing process. Because as I went through therapy, I was able to start singing again. So now, several years later, I just released a new album that I produced and recorded, wrote and arranged myself. I'm singing live again, and I could not have done it without KCSARC.
Thank you, Svi. My name is Deanna Schutz. I serve as Vice President on KCSARC's Board of Directors. What first brought me to KCSARC was my experience and my search for an organization working at the intersection of sexual assault and many of the social injustices that exist today. I, like so many of you, wanted to be part of the solution. What has kept me at KCSARC as a supporter and now as a board leader is that I have seen firsthand the positive difference that KCSARC makes in the lives of children, families, and adult sexual assault survivors right here in our community. Today, I have the honor of asking you to join me in standing with KCSARC by giving as much as you can so that survivors of sexual assault can get the support they need. For a first-time event, we are thrilled that so many of you were able to join us. We have a goal of raising $60,000 today, and we have already raised $51,400. Thanks to a generous group of donors, we are able to match donations made for this event. Now is the time to give as much as you can, and it's so easy. Here are the steps. Click on the donation link in the chat or in the YouTube event description, or grab your mobile phone and text the word GIVE KCSARC, GIVE KCSARC, all one word, to number 474747. That's GIVE KCSARC to number 474747. And that will lead you to our donation page. If corporate matching is available to you, please use it to increase your impact. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for drawing on our collective strength and being part of the solution. I'm now thrilled to introduce to you one of the most influential voices of our time in the movement to end sexual assault, Tarana Burke, who joins Mary Ellen Stone, KCSARC's Executive Director, for the conversation you all tuned in to hear.
Thanks, Deanna, and welcome to all of you as you're part of this conversation. Before Tarana and I start talking, we'll be like 1 minute here. A quick thing, we'll be having an opportunity for people to send their questions in to Tarana after she and I speak. And what you can do is text the phrase Ask Tarana, that's also all one word, at 474747, and we'll answer those questions a little bit later on in the text. So now it is my honor to introduce to you and welcome the founder of the Me Too movement, Tarana Burke. And she's also the executive director of Me Too International, known for empowering marginalized voices, and her work, your work, Tarana, has helped inspire survivors across the world to know that they're not alone. So I want to say thank you so much for being here, and welcome to our virtual audience, or ask our virtual audience to welcome you joining us for the first KCSARC event. Tarana, I am going to go through some questions that I want to touch on, probably condense them a little bit. But let me take us back 3 years, right? When Me Too started and the hashtag was going and our phones were ringing and phones were ringing around the world. What do you remember what you were thinking about at that time, and sort of were you as surprised as I was?
Oh yeah, I think anybody who has done this work any length of time was completely gobsmacked at what was happening. And I think mostly because if you've done this work any amount of time, you know that it sometimes feels like shouting into a well to get to talk about sexual violence, right? You don't, I have been in many social justice spaces, movement spaces, where I've tried to bring this conversation to the table as a social justice issue. And the pushback I get is it's an individual issue, right? It's about getting more street lights or better security or things like that. And when I saw a international sustained dialogue about sexual violence that was led by survivors, right? I think the misconception people have about that moment 3 years ago is that it was about Hollywood. It was predicated by the women in Hollywood coming forward and telling their stories, bravely coming forward and telling their stories. But we are here in this moment because of the bravery and the tenacity of survivors, everyday people who decided to say Me Too.
Yeah.
And so while I was completely shocked that it was happening, I also had a sense of, I remember I was writing about this recently, just almost a sense of dread, because the other thing that my experience had taught me is that disclosure is difficult, and it is never, it's never the path that you think, right? That you might plan out in your mind, or if you didn't have a plan, it's full of surprises. And I was like watching people disclose across the internet, which is a beautiful place and useful, but I'm like, these people don't have a container to process.
Right.
It's just me too everywhere. And I kept thinking about like tomorrow, what happens when you wake up and you realize that you've told the world your deepest, darkest secret, or you shared this thing that you've been holding so close to yourself for so many years, and you have nobody to talk to. Yeah. What about the person who wrote Me Too and nobody liked their status, right? Like, just all of these things were plaguing my brain about who's going to help walk people through what happened. So when we started doing this work, it was in community circles. Mm-hmm. When I shared the ability to say Me Too or invited people in to say that, it was in the safest possible spaces that we could create. And it was a continuous space, right? So they came back the following week and we dissected some more. Part of what's happened over the last 3 years is me trying to figure out, how do we serve everybody?
When you get that figured out, you let me know, because
man.
Yeah.
Listen. Yeah, it's difficult. But that day, 3 years ago, it was just, oh God, mind blowing. Yeah. I thought I had such a range of emotions.
Yeah. Well, so let me say thank you and congratulations for doing that. And I certainly remember at that time going on some local talk show about what Me Too and Thanksgiving, and that the Thanksgiving table may not be the place where you really want to put this all out, or if you are, think about it in advance, because because to your point, there will be repercussions. You may not get the reaction that you want. So that takes me now, I guess, to saying, two things. One is, how do we serve everybody? Because we're up 22% over the last couple of years, which is good, and we're needed. So there's that. But then sort of what is how do we help other people? How do we help the larger community be that support? Because honestly, we will never serve everybody, and for good reasons too, because not everybody wants to come to an organization. So how do we really empower the bigger community to say, you've got a role here?
I mean, that's honestly not for it to sound like a commercial plug, but that's honestly why we created Act Two. Okay. One of the things that was so difficult for me, I traveled extensively around the world for the last 3 years. And the question I get all the time is, how can I be involved? Either what's next, or how can I be more involved? What can I do? What can I, and a couple of things occurred to me. One, whenever people ask what's next, I used to get irritated, but now I know where it's coming from. And part of my irritation was like, people are quick to say that they follow movements, but you don't really understand what movements are. And so movements are moved by people. And so when people ask me what's next, I always say, what's next is whatever you do next. Yeah. You are what's next. There is no Me Too movement if people don't stop treating it like a spectator sport and get actively involved in this work of interrupting sexual violence. So we created, but also at the same time, everybody's not an activist. People only have the capacity that they have. And if we could somehow make it very clear that every single thing you do toward this work is necessary. So there are some people who have a lot of judgment around, like, folks who only retweet things on the internet or post stuff on the internet, and they say, you're not a real activist. All you do is you're an internet activist. That's fine. Yeah. We will take you because you are a conduit for information for your circle of your sphere of influence. And that's important. But if you can only have a certain amount of dollars, a certain amount of time per week, then we created this tool for you to figure out things that are best for your capacity. But the flip side is, this is not just about boots on the ground. It's not just about like getting more volunteers and more donations and more people to take trainings. We also have to shift culture.
Yeah.
And so when people ask what they can do, they may not have capacity to do any of the physical activities, right? That involve time or money or things like that. But everybody can control themselves, and you can shift culture. So we want you to read some books and listen to some podcasts and learn about some topics, because it's just as important to me to have somebody join me on the front lines as it is to have an informed juror go into a courtroom that understands the breadth of sexual violence and what it does to a survivor as they're making decisions that are going to either adversely or positively affect their lives. So we can't downplay any role that a person can play, because we won't really make the kind of impact that we need unless we have a cultural shift at the same time.
I think, just that example around an informed juror is such a great one. And it sort of leads me to one of the things that I think as part of the culture shift we really struggle with is, how do we hold two truths about one person? And I've heard you speak about that. Every community is dealing with that, of a well-respected figure in whatever arena, and then we hear this, and we can't get there. It seems like that is one of the real stumbling blocks in my mind that we're up against, is how do we hold those two truths?
Okay, sorry. I think that's a huge part of the culture shift, is that, and it's less to do with sexual violence and more to do with this, I think, this moment in time where people can be elevated to such high status. Like our love of celebrity, right? The kind of cult of celebrity is at an all-time high. And we have a form of that we employ in our communities, whether it's the coach or our favorite teacher or the preacher. If we could see people as human beings, I think it would help. Now I know I sound very pie in the sky. Like, we need everybody to see. I know it's easier said than done, but I think we have to keep doubling down and reinforcing on folks' humanity, because it is. I talk about two truths when I talk about in the Black community and communities of color. There are multiple truths that we have to hold as real and valuable. That Black men, that sexual violence has been weaponized against Black men for centuries in this country, right? We've seen it happen over and over and over again from Central Park 5. That's true. That is a indisputable truth about the history of this country. Mm-hmm. What's also true is that Black women have the second highest rate of sexual violence in this country. And what's also true is that a lot of that violence happens intra-communally. Mm-hmm. And what's also true is there's no special depravity in the Black community. There's no predilection towards violence. There's no explanation that would say these group of people are worse than that group of people. But all of these things are true, and they're complicated, and it makes dealing with sexual violence in our communities that much more difficult. And I think those of us who do have the ability to hold multiple truths have to keep speaking the truth over and over and over again, because in the way that is compassionate and empathetic, to people to have to face that much truth about themselves, about people who they love. We take on the responsibility and that guilt for not knowing or for even thinking that this person could be, this other way. And it all of that gets in the way of dealing with the simple fact that this person has caused harm. So, I mean, I don't have a really eloquent answer for that because it's one of the most difficult things, like you said, that we deal with. But there are numbers of us who see the truth and have that ability to hold multiple truths every day. And I think we really have to keep speaking to it and making it easier and more clear and very plain for people who struggle with it.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely. And what makes me think, too, is the way when we started probably in this work, and there was this sort of tendency, and I'll use this word in air quotes, to sort of sex offenders are monsters, right? They're these terrible people. And that, I mean, it was an understandable reaction, but that really then makes it much more difficult to say, well, therefore,
right, then my preacher can't be this person.
Exactly, because I know one when I see one, and my preacher is not, or my coach is not, or my doctor is not, or so it's almost.
I'm sorry, you just made me think about the other part. I think too that would help is if we had. This is the culture shift part, right? We need media interventions here to help people reimagine the reality of the sexual violence and sex offenders and people who commit sexual offenses, right? And normalize that it could be literally anybody, and that you can be the guy next door, father of the year, coach of the team, great guy, and still be a sex offender. And conversely, one of the things I think is interesting that we never talk about is the number of women teachers who have been fired in the last, my God, 5 or 10 years for assaulting their male students.
Yeah.
That's also another intervention that has to happen to dismantle this idea of like what's macho and what's sexy and like the cougar and this is just a like frisky older lady going for the young guy. It's a violation of trust. It is a misuse of power, and it is illegal. But we don't label those women as sex offenders, right? We don't see the blonde-haired, young, beautiful teacher who had sex with the captain of the football team as a sex offender.
Right.
We have to reevaluate our relationship to all of those notions. And I think the media could help if they would move away from some of the stereotypes of the boogeyman who's going to jump out the bushes and get you, or even the creepy priest, right? I think we've moved into this territory now where, you suspect the priest because of all of the controversy.
Sure. I think that's true. Well, and that does take me to one of the things. I mean, so let me try to hold two pieces of information here. One is, how can people help with a culture shift? Well, part of that is voting. I mean, we're in the election season right now, and one of the issues that we have coming up in Washington State is on the ballot is a law that would uphold a legislative decision, R90. It would uphold a legislative decision that was made last spring, which says that we have to have comprehensive sexual health, K-12.
Education.
And there's an effort to repeal that, and so we're hoping that we can actually sustain that. So that's something that all of our
I hope so.
Yeah, but that goes to culture shift and helping young people understand what healthy relationships are, right? So that you don't fall into that.
Yeah, no, I think that one of the key tools we have in our arsenal to fight sexual violence and to shift culture is comprehensive sex education. That if you think about what we have now, which is, kids across the country who hear maybe some form of sex ed in like the 6th grade, and then they hear it again in maybe like the 10th or 11th grade, right? And it's like a teacher in front of the class maybe trying to put a condom on a banana or something like that, or telling them all these scary stories about STDs, and it's not like the curriculums are all over the place. It's highly dependent on who's teaching it and what their belief systems are. And then you have that group of young people going into college college and they sit in front of a computer and they press about sexual violence on college campuses and how to be responsible and that kind of thing. And that's it. They don't hear another thing for 4 years. Right. Now you put that reality up against a generation of young people who from kindergarten have been hearing about boundaries and respect and bodily autonomy in right. very age appropriate ways. And you layer that on every year until right. they graduate. Then you have a generation of young people for who the idea of sexual violence is vile. Right. It has been social. They've been so even if there's still instances of sexual violence, it's like we have now helped them understand that it's tantamount to murder. It is on the books right now, rape and murder are up there in terms of like right. felonies and crimes and things like that. But socially, I often tell people if you would just replace the word rape with murder sometimes, that you would get the gravity of this. Because they talk so flippantly about, oh, that's that guy, I don't know, there was rumors about him that he supposedly like raped a couple of girls or he got whatever. You would never say, I think that's the guy who murdered a couple of people, but I'm not sure, but he's really cute. Yeah. Yeah. That would be like a deal breaker. If there were rumors that right. he was murdering people, right? Right. And so, well, we have to be re-socialized to see that. And I think comprehensive sex education is one of the best ways that we have to do that.
Well, I keep sending good thoughts because we're hopeful yes. that this is going to pass. But then it really then will give both students, but the hope is too that it will help families be able to normalize more of these conversations, because we have never seen it as it's either going to be the schools or family. It's got to be both. It's got to be all. Right. And it's got to be a whole lot more than that. You talk about the media and how do we bring the media in to support this. But I think our young people need all the good examples and tools that we can give them.
No question about it.
We can't just limit it to all the work that families are doing. We've got to be able to reinforce those. Yeah,
no question about that. I totally agree. And I wish you so much luck on that.
Well, we'll keep you posted, too. Maybe bring you back for this. So I know we have a number of questions that have come in from people in the chat. And thanks for hanging in there. So I want to just shift to going to raising some of these questions with you.
Sure.
Okay. So here's the first one. In this pandemic time, when nearly everything is done virtually, how can I personally, as an adult survivor, make a difference to even one child suffering from abuse or to an adult survivor struggling with moving forward?
So again, not to keep plugging our platform, but this is the perfect scenario for that. There are tons of places that need donations. There are tons of places that need volunteers, even virtual. There are places where you can get trainings, to be a first responder or bystander intervention trainings. I think this is a great time while people have time on their hands and a little bit of space to dig into these things, to try to explore some of the things that are right at your fingertips that you can do that take probably less time than you even think. But I think those are some really easy, like low-hanging fruit ways that you can do that.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, so here's a couple more coming in. This is more to you personally. How are you coping during this multi-layered challenge of our own personal trauma, COVID, Black Lives Matter struggle for equity, the elections? How are you doing?
I don't know. If I'm being completely honest, I wake up some days and my days are like a blur. And then a news item will hit and it will sit on my chest in ways that, one, make me feel like, why am I doing this work if we can't even have this thing? If people, like whatever the thing is. So it's been challenging. Self-care and sort of, I have really moved, and I think this is something that's helpful for everybody. Self-care is not working because I don't have, I have my own struggles. But community care has been working for me. And I think community care is really where we benefit the most. And I mean, I'm talking about the folks who call and check up on me, the girlfriends who come by and say, you need to get out the house, put on your mask, get in the car, we're going for a drive. Those kind of things have been so helpful. My community who understand this moment and the gravity of this moment have like doubled in their efforts to be supportive, and I'm super grateful for that, because I certainly, and my spiritual practice, I'm Christian, and I am very, very grounded, or try to be. I don't want to, I would hate for my pastor to be watching this stream and be like, but I didn't see you last Sunday on the video. But I do try to stay connected to the spiritual practices that have held me my entire Christian life. And so I guess it's really my whole life, because I was baptized at 7 months. So
okay, yeah, that's your whole life. Yeah.
It's my whole life. Those are the things that are important to me, and I try to make time and space for, and sort of sitting with myself, if that makes sense. I got a lot of pushback, believe it or not, at the beginning of right after George Floyd was murdered and Breonna Taylor, and people were saying things to me like, well, why are you talking about this? This has nothing to do with Me Too. And I just was so astonished that people couldn't see, one, that my Black life, I clearly am invested in this moment for a reason. My background is so full of work around racial injustice. But more importantly, that there are the fight for racial justice in this country and the work around sexual violence are inextricably linked. And it raised another level of concern, I guess, for me, and a challenge to really help people see that, because I realized that we're trained to think in buckets. Oh, we're not doing this now, we're doing this. Climate change has nothing to do with, Black Lives Matter, and Black Lives Matter has nothing to do with gun violence. And it's just, all of these things are inextricably linked and in very clear ways. So it kind of added another level of work, if you will, for me and for our organization.
Yeah. Well, and I think, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I like what you're saying about we tend to think of our lives in buckets, and I'm doing this work, and then I'll do this work, and then maybe when I retire, I'll do something else. That they're not interconnected in some way. One of the viewers asked if you could recommend books, podcasts, or documentaries, and I wonder what we can do is just get that from you at a little bit later, and then push that out to the whole group so people have got that.
I think that, again, I'm going to keep pushing our tool. I'm
Your
so
tool,
excited.
yeah.
This is my first talk since the tool has gone live. And if you go on to act2.metoomovement.org, you can filter for around interest, and you can filter around involvement and around issues. And involvement will give you education and information and culture, and it'll give you books, and it'll give you podcasts, it'll give you studies, it'll give you all kinds of information that you can connect to. And I think actually we did a better job of collecting that stuff, because there's just so much information out there that people don't know exists.
Yeah.
And to aggregate that and put it, kind of curate it and put it in one place, I think is super useful.
Yeah, that is a great service. And for all of you watching, we'll send that link out so that you've got that. And I understand that will continue to grow too as you're taking more submissions and working out your own kinks with that. Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I think we've got two more questions, then I'm going to pivot it over here to Deanne. Okay, so two questions that are certainly real topical, real current. Given that we're in the middle of Supreme Court, presumably confirmation or vote for confirmation, the viewer talked about Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation, despite credible accusations, feels like a huge setback. How did you prop yourself up after that? And do you think we can ride out this tide in some way?
So I'm going to tell you, as disappointing as it felt, outside of Me Too going viral, the one moment in the last 3 years that I felt palpable, I felt the weight of survivors in this country, of our sort of collective despair, was around Kavanaugh. I mean, I would meet people in the airport and in other public spaces who kind of just were like, how did we get, after Anita Hill and Clarence Thomas, like, how did we get here? So I want to say this respectfully that it was heavy for me. I mean, I was in the room,
That's
right, for
right.
most of
That's
the
right. I
proceeding.
remember hearing
I
that.
watched
Wow.
it,
Yeah.
yeah, in real time. And I'll never forget, I was sitting next to Fatima Gosgraves from the National Women's Law Center on one side, Alyssa Milano on the other side, and some other like women leaders in the country. And the and I'm gonna say this as much as it's just the truth. That entire panel, from one end to the other, I know it was split it was split politically. There was a feeling from the feeling that I left with is that nobody is really invested in this, right? It felt, on the one hand, it felt evil to some degree, like these people who really are just mean spirited and evil and making a mockery of who we are as survivors. But on the other hand, it felt performative and yeah. So my point of saying that is what I took away from the Kavanaugh hearings didn't come from what happened in that room. Because I also didn't have a really big expectation that he would not be confirmed. I figured that he would be confirmed.
Yeah.
So what I took away from that, though, was happening outside of that room. It's actually the Kavanaugh hearings that prompted me to start Me Too International. Because it really was. It was, I put a call out on social media on like a Sunday for people to come out, wear black, and come out that Monday and to like in protest of this moment and to come to the Capitol. And I remember it rained that Monday. And I thought, God, we were out there early, thinking people are not going to show. The media's all going to be here. We're going to look really crazy. Hundreds of people showed up. We marched in the rain from the State House to the Capitol. We sang songs. We chanted. We held up our signs. We didn't even have a proper podium to do media. And somebody brought a megaphone and we just kind of made speeches through the megaphone until the thing was set up. It was such an organic and beautiful and spirited moment that it made clear to me that we have reached a place in this country and this moment in time where sexual violence can be on the front line, where people are willing to put their feet to the street and their bodies on the ground, not just for the general issue of like women's rights, but specifically about sexual violence. And I had not experienced that. I have marched for many things. I have organized around many things. And I think one of the most difficult in my career of that has been around sexual violence. But like when I saw the two survivors who stood in the doorway, the elevator door, and said, you're going to look at me and you're going to hear me, I thought, this is the moment. We have to seize this moment. I've always had a vision for how we move forward to interrupt sexual violence. And I don't want to be a figurehead that's carried around from organization to organization to speak about this in general. I want to advance a vision. And so we started the organization. So I encourage people to look at the victory of that moment is that I think a lot of us looked around and said, look at us. This is a movement. This is not a hashtag. This is not a moment. This is a collection of people who unfortunately are bonded by a trauma that we can't relieve ourselves of, but we can turn that trauma into some triumph and over and over and over again. And we can find community and solidarity with each other and make that thing mean something, right? Because I think what a lot of survivors struggle with is like the why me? Why did this happen to me?
Yeah.
Why was I the person that was selected, right? And you'll never have an answer to that. But I know what became effective for me is that when I could flip that question and stop asking why me, but turn this in, make it mean something, right? Like for me, it had to mean something. Mm-hmm. I was a child when I was violated, and I was violated again as an adult. Mm-hmm. I believe deeply in God, and I believe deeply that God loves me, and I believe deeply in my faith. And I don't believe in a vengeful God. And I don't believe in a tit for tat petty God. And I do believe that there's meaning in everything. And if I could make that pain mean something, then it helped it helps in my healing process that much more. So I won't take Kavanaugh as a defeat. I won't. I know what this country means. I know what it's built on, and I know how they operate. So I don't put my faith in that. They're going to do what they were meant to do. They were going to do what they've always done until they come up against a force that can stop them. And I think we're that force. I really do.
Thank you. Because...
Sorry, I got a little preachy.
Well, but if every roadblock we came up against we took as a defeat, we wouldn't be sitting here today.
Absolutely.
We would not be making the progress that we've made on this issue today.
Absolutely.
And so we've got to be able to take that long view. And we've got to be able to use our voices and say, it's bigger than any one of us. And we can all use our experiences and our voices and our research. However we do that, whether that's help, whether that's, your friends coming and propping you up, getting you out of the house, or whether it's people donating or volunteering or speaking out or being able to hold two truths, we've got to be able to do that.
I absolutely believe that.
I want to say thank you so much for your time. I would love to continue this conversation, and I hope we can figure out a time to do that. Definitely, I will be calling you after the elections to let you know how things go on R90.
Oh, please do. Thank you.
Yeah, because it's an opportunity for the state, really. It's very exciting.
I hope people see that. And I want to say thank you. I'm so glad that folks have found ways to continue to have spaces like this, even in the pandemic, because I know folks are tired of sitting in front of their Zoom screens and their computer screens, but when it's for a valuable thing where you can invest in yourself, where you can have some reflection, where you can have an amen corner, I think it's so valuable. So I appreciate that you scrambled and figured out how to make this virtual and still create this space for survivors and for practitioners who are doing the work.
Right. Thank you again, and thanks to our tech team for getting you back here.
Yes.
So, okay, and on that,
high five.
Take good. I would elbow bump you if I could. So take good care.
All right. Bye.
Bye, Deanne. You want to?
Absolutely. Thank you, Mary Ellen and Tarana, so much for getting us revved up and getting us out of that swirling no connection button. That was a great conversation, and thank you for helping us with that. And really a call to action for all of us, right? We all have a role to play in ending sexual violence. And while we were having those technical difficulties, it appears that a lot of you went ahead and started donating and spending that time wisely. And look at that thermometer. We have surpassed our goal, really. We're at $62,787. Thank you so much. That is incredible and inspirational all in its own. I want to let you know that you can continue to donate until midnight. So those of you who want to take a break and think, I think I want to support KCSARC a little bit more, please do that. Let that be your bedtime ritual tonight, and just hit that button again. And remember, we want to thank our generous group of donors that are able to match the donations of this event, and that is an absolute wonderful thing. And again, thank you to our sponsors, both Amazon and Rushing, for making this event possible. And last but not least, remember we had those 2 Alaska Airlines tickets waiting for you. And I just got word that we pulled the lucky winner. And so congratulations, drum roll, to Kathleen Anamosa. Congratulations. We'll be in contact with you. We're thrilled that you won those tickets, and thank you for hanging in there with us. Thank you all for remaining with us during this time, and thank you for drawing on our strength and standing with survivors of sexual assault. Thank you so much for making our first ever virtual event not flawless, but very successful. We appreciate you. Thank you very much. Have a great rest of the day.